People who seem to hate others for no clear reason are often projecting unresolved inner conflicts onto external targets. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism in which individuals attribute their own unwanted feelings, traits, or insecurities to someone else. When a person feels anger, shame, envy, or inadequacy but cannot consciously face those emotions, the mind looks for an outlet. Another person becomes a convenient screen onto which these uncomfortable feelings are cast, even if that person has done nothing to deserve it. This type of hatred is rarely about the person being targeted and far more about the internal struggles of the one expressing hostility. Someone who feels unsuccessful may resent another person's confidence or progress, even if it is modest. The resentment does not come from the other person's actions, but from the painful comparison that highlights what the hater feels they lack. Hatred becomes a way to avoid self-reflection. Often, these individuals are disconnected from their own emotional awareness. They may not realize why they feel irritated, threatened, or angry in someone's presence. Instead of asking themselves what has been triggered internally, they instinctively externalize the discomfort. Blaming another person feels easier and safer than examining personal vulnerabilities or failures. Unresolved trauma can intensify this pattern. People who grew up in environments where emotions were invalidated, punished, or ignored may never have learned how to process feelings in a healthy way. As adults, emotional discomfort can feel overwhelming, leading them to lash out at others without understanding the true source of their reaction. The hatred appears sudden and irrational, but it is rooted in long-standing emotional wounds. In many cases, projection is reinforced by rigid self-images. Individuals who strongly believe they are good, moral, or superior may experience intense discomfort when they feel jealousy, anger, or weakness. Since these emotions clash with their self-image, they must be displaced. Targeting someone else allows them to preserve their internal narrative while avoiding inner conflict. Social environments can also amplify projection. In competitive workplaces or social groups, people may feel constant pressure to measure themselves against others. When someone becomes a symbol of perceived threat, even unintentionally, hostility can grow without any direct interaction. The target becomes a reminder of personal fears rather than a real adversary. This kind of hatred is often persistent because the underlying issues remain unresolved. Even if the target changes behavior or withdraws, the hater may simply find someone new to project onto. Without self-awareness or emotional growth, the cycle continues, fueled by the same internal discomfort. Ironically, people who project hatred often feel justified in their emotions. The mind constructs narratives to support the hostility, exaggerating minor flaws or inventing negative intentions. These stories serve to rationalize feelings that originally had nothing to do with the other person at all. Understanding projection does not excuse harmful behavior, but it provides clarity. Recognizing that unexplained hatred is often a mirror of someone else's inner turmoil can help reduce self-blame. It shifts the focus from wondering what you did wrong to understanding that you may simply be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time in someone else's psychological struggle. Ultimately, projection reveals more about the hater than the hated. It exposes unmet needs, suppressed emotions, and unresolved conflicts that demand attention. Without confronting these inner realities, the hatred remains a symptom, endlessly searching for new targets. A powerful driver of irrational hatred is deep insecurity. When people lack a stable sense of self-worth, they are more likely to perceive others as threats rather than neutral individuals. Even someone who is kind, quiet, or uninvolved can trigger hostility simply by existing in a way that challenges another person's fragile self-image. Envy plays a central role in this dynamic. Envy does not always arise from obvious success or privilege. Sometimes it is triggered by authenticity, emotional freedom, confidence, or peace. Seeing qualities in others that one wishes they possessed can provoke resentment, especially when the individual feels incapable of achieving those qualities themselves. For insecure individuals, the world often feels like a constant competition. Rather than viewing life as collaborative or abundant, they interpret it as a zero-sum game where someone else's gain represents their loss. In this mindset, even neutral people become rivals, and hatred becomes a way to psychologically diminish the perceived threat. This perception of threat is often unconscious. The insecure person may not explicitly think, "I feel inferior," but instead experience vague irritation, judgment, or dislike. These emotions feel real and justified, even though they are disconnected from any actual wrongdoing. The mind confuses emotional discomfort with external danger. Social comparison intensifies these reactions. In cultures that emphasize achievement, status, and visibility, people are constantly evaluating themselves against others. When someone appears to be doing well or simply living comfortably in their own skin, it can trigger a painful sense of inadequacy. Hatred becomes a coping mechanism to protect the ego. In some cases, insecurity is masked by arrogance or hostility. People may attack others preemptively to avoid feeling vulnerable. By positioning themselves as superior or critical, they attempt to regain a sense of control. This behavior can be especially confusing for the target, who may not understand why they are being treated with contempt. Fear also underlies much of this hatred. Fear of being replaced, ignored, exposed, or rendered irrelevant can drive people to lash out. When someone symbolizes change or growth, even unintentionally, they may become a focal point for these fears. Hatred then functions as a defensive barrier against perceived loss. This dynamic is common in close environments such as families, workplaces, and social circles, where comparison feels unavoidable. The closer the proximity, the stronger the emotional reaction can be. Hatred may emerge not from distance or difference, but from uncomfortable closeness. Unfortunately, insecurity-driven hatred often resists logic or reassurance. Compliments, kindness, or attempts at understanding may fail because the issue is internal, not relational. Until the insecure person develops self-acceptance, external validation rarely resolves the hostility. For those on the receiving end, recognizing insecurity as the source can be grounding. It reminds you that another person's hatred may be rooted in their fear of not being enough. While this does not eliminate the pain, it can help you detach emotionally and avoid internalizing their negativity. Some people hate others for no clear reason because hostility helps them maintain a sense of control. When individuals feel powerless in their own lives, they may attempt to regain dominance by devaluing or opposing others. Hatred becomes a way to assert identity, boundaries, and authority, even when no real conflict exists. This behavior is closely tied to rigid identity structures. People who strongly define themselves by certain beliefs, roles, or values may react aggressively to anyone who challenges or simply differs from those identities. The presence of someone who lives differently can feel like an attack, even if no words are exchanged. In such cases, hatred functions as a form of psychological self-defense. By rejecting or demonizing another person, individuals reinforce their own worldview and protect it from doubt. Accepting the other person's legitimacy would require questioning their own assumptions, which can feel destabilizing. Group identity can intensify this tendency. When people derive their sense of self from belonging to a group, they may adopt hostility toward outsiders or perceived deviance. Even within the same group, subtle differences can provoke aggression if they threaten the dominant narrative or hierarchy. Control-driven hatred often appears moralized. The hater convinces themselves that their dislike is justified by principles, values, or standards. This moral framing allows them to feel righteous rather than insecure or fearful. Hatred becomes not only acceptable but virtuous in their own mind. In many cases, these individuals struggle with ambiguity and complexity. They prefer clear categories of right and wrong, us and them. People who do not fit neatly into these categories can trigger discomfort. Hatred simplifies the world by reducing others to negative labels. This need for control can stem from early life experiences where chaos, unpredictability, or lack of safety were prevalent. As adults, these individuals may cling to rigid structures to feel secure. Anyone who disrupts that sense of order, even passively, may be met with hostility. Power dynamics also play a role. Hatred can be used to intimidate, silence, or marginalize others. By expressing dislike or contempt, individuals attempt to position themselves above the target. This behavior often reveals a fear of losing status rather than genuine confidence. For the person being hated, this experience can feel deeply personal, even though it is not. The hostility is less about who you are and more about what you represent to someone else's psychological system. You become a symbol rather than an individual. Understanding the need for control behind irrational hatred can help you respond with clarity rather than confusion. It highlights that some people are not reacting to you, but to their fear of instability, loss of identity, or lack of power. In many cases, the healthiest response is emotional distance and self-preservation rather than engagement. Emotional immaturity is a significant factor in why some people develop hatred toward others without a clear or rational cause. Emotionally immature individuals often lack the skills needed to identify, regulate, and communicate their feelings effectively. When uncomfortable emotions arise, such as frustration, disappointment, or confusion, they may not know how to process them internally. As a result, these emotions are discharged outward in the form of hostility toward others. People with low emotional maturity often operate on impulse rather than reflection. Instead of pausing to examine why they feel irritated by someone, they immediately accept the emotion as truth. This leads to snap judgments and exaggerated reactions that are disconnected from reality. Hatred becomes a quick emotional release rather than a considered response. Unprocessed emotions accumulate over time. When feelings like anger, grief, or resentment are repeatedly suppressed, they do not disappear. Instead, they linger beneath the surface, waiting for a trigger. An innocent interaction, a neutral presence, or even a stranger can activate this emotional buildup, resulting in disproportionate dislike that seems to come out of nowhere. Emotionally immature individuals often struggle with emotional responsibility. Rather than acknowledging that their feelings belong to them, they believe others are responsible for how they feel. This mindset leads them to blame people around them for internal discomfort. Hatred becomes a way to avoid accountability for their own emotional state. These individuals may also have difficulty tolerating emotional discomfort. Feelings such as jealousy or insecurity can feel unbearable, prompting defensive reactions. Instead of sitting with discomfort and learning from it, they push it away by targeting someone else. Hatred offers temporary relief, even though it ultimately reinforces emotional avoidance. Another aspect of emotional immaturity is poor empathy development. When people struggle to understand others as complex emotional beings, they are more likely to reduce them to simplistic negative interpretations. This lack of nuance makes it easier to justify dislike without evidence or meaningful interaction. Conflict avoidance paradoxically plays a role as well. Some emotionally immature people avoid addressing real issues in their lives, such as unmet needs or unresolved relationships. Redirecting emotional energy toward someone unrelated allows them to feel active without confronting what truly needs attention. This pattern is often learned early in life. Individuals who were not taught emotional language, validation, or regulation may never develop these skills naturally. Without guidance, they default to reaction rather than reflection. Hatred becomes a learned emotional shortcut rather than a conscious choice. For those on the receiving end, this type of hatred can feel confusing and destabilizing. There is often no logical explanation because the reaction is not grounded in the present moment. Recognizing emotional immaturity as the source can help restore perspective and prevent unnecessary self-doubt. Ultimately, hatred rooted in emotional immaturity reflects stalled emotional growth. Until individuals learn to face, process, and take responsibility for their emotions, they may continue projecting hostility onto others. The absence of self-awareness ensures that the cycle repeats, regardless of who happens to be nearby.